Yo, what's going on, guys? This is BunnyMuffins. I got the new meta snapshot for week 2 of patch 10.14, and there were 2 hotfixes since I released my last meta snapshot, so a few things have changed. Not too much overall, but there are some interesting compositions that might surprise you, and even though the meta is dominated by Protectors and Dark Stars, you'll see that a lot of players have these 2 comps played in maybe like 15 out of their past 20 games. There are some other compositions that you could still play out there, and let's just go into what they are. After S tier, we have a bunch of Dark Star variants that include 6, 4, and 2 Dark Star Protectors, which again also includes 6, 4, and 2 Protectors. We have Shredder, Vanguard Mystic, Sniper to round out A tier, and in B tier we have Blaster, Brawler, and Cybernetics. The only C tier comps I would really play are 6 Blademasters and the Star Guardian Sorcerer composition. I'd kind of ignore everything else, and we'll get into why later. So first up, we have the Dark Star variants. There's so many different versions of this composition that we can't really go into every single one of them. It depends on the galaxy, it depends on what your opponents are playing, it depends what you hit during the course of the game, including items and champions. So if you have a lot of swords, you could go for Shaco and Jhin. If you have a lot of ability power and attack speed, you could go ahead and go for Xerath. Or if you don't even get a Shaco early, you could just go for Jhin carry until you get to Xerath and run a Karma instead and play some Mystics. Maybe there's a bunch of magic damage in your lobbies. So there's so many different options for this build that you really just need the base of something like 2 Protectors, 2 Dark Star, and hopefully get to 4 or 6 Dark Star. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention there are 6 Dark Star variants too, where you have this team over here, add in a Karma, add in a Mordekaiser or a Dark Star Spatula, and you'll be able to get a lot of damage from your team that way. But again, this all depends on what you hit during the course of the game. As long as you have the Jarvan with a different Protector start, it doesn't have to be Rakan, it could be Xin Zhao, it could be Nico. You don't need the Warmugs either, and then after that you just need some sort of backline damage and you'll be set to go from there. Next up, we have the Protector composition. Again, similar to the one before, Jarvan's the star of the show this patch, even after the nerf where they nerfed his mana by 20, going from 80 total mana to 100 total mana. He is still by far one of the best champions, and he has played, again, in approximately 15 out of 20 games for most of the top players right now. But the Protector comp, there's like a couple new versions that are available. Not available, they're always available, but ones that are being played at the highest level. And one of them is one that revolves around a ton of different legendary units. So you'll end up having 4 Protectors, Nico, Jarvan, Xin Zhao, Rakan, and Urgot, some combination of those 4 people. Normally you ditch Xin Zhao later in the game once you find Urgot, and then after that, you go ahead and add in Xerath, you go ahead and add in Janna, you go ahead and add in Lulu and Soraka, sometimes even Echo or Fizz. And yeah, it's just 4 Protectors and around 5 to 6 legendaries, depending on how big your team can get. But yeah, there are a lot of other different random variations of Protectors. There's 2 Protector, there's 4 Protector. You could play it with Sorcerers, you could play it with Snipers, Infiltrators, Star Guardians, and again, the legendary unit composition that we just talked about just before. If you have a great Protector start, you can just go ahead and go any one of these other options depending on whatever items you get. I will say that the stronger versions are probably the random legendary unit version, but you have to go to level 9, so you can't do that every game. Snipers are really good, Infiltrators are really good, and Sorcerers are... I try not to play too much Sorcerer, but if there's a lot of Vanguards in your lobbies, you could go ahead and go for that comp as well. So next up, we have the A tier and we have the Shredder tier. Now we get into some of the comps that are much less played, but again, Shredder still uses Jarvan. I'd go ahead and slow roll this comp, so don't level up early, try to get as many Xayahs as you can, then starting from 3-1, whenever you have 50 or more gold, roll down to 50 gold every turn until you hit 3 stars of at least Xayah, preferably Xayah, Fiora, and Jarvan. Sometimes you go for Shen if you're hitting a lot of Shens, but you don't need to force that too much. And then you'll go ahead and either play the 6 Blademaster version or the 3 Blademaster version. I have the 6 Blademaster version out here right now. This is what I've been seeing more often, but if you happen to go for 3 Blademasters, you just add in stuff like Caitlyn, which you hyper rolled for before. It really just depends on whatever you rolled down with, and then you'll add an Ashe for the Celestial buff and Sniper with Caitlyn. But it's a very good comp. You really just need Last Whisper and then any other Xayah items. You could go triple offensive. You don't need defensive items with such as Quicksilver as I have listed out here, but it's still a very good comp. I don't play it too much personally just because I've never been good at hyper roll compositions or slow roll compositions, but if that's something you're into, you can definitely go ahead and keep playing Shredder if you have the item requirements for Xayah. So next up, probably one of my favorite comps of this patch, it's Vanguard Mystic, and this composition is really good because it pretty much makes half the compositions in the game useless. If you do purely attack damage, you're not going to beat this composition, and you're going to be taking like 15 to 20 life every time you play them. So that's why I love this composition, because it forces people not to be greedy, because if the cybernetic player plays against you, they can't push level 9 and try to beat you through Thresh later in the game. So that's why this composition is so incredibly strong. One thing I forgot to change, instead of Victor at level 9, I like having Thresh in. Hopefully I'll change this sometime today or later this week. But Thresh is really good as your late game because the Vanguards live for so long, so that means Thresh has more time to get more units from your bench onto the board. And also if you pull in other Vanguards, they do get the 6 Vanguard buff, so you could get even more tankiness into your team during the course of the match. Of course, other champions that are great to pull in are champions such as Urgot, just because he auto kills units. Random legendary units are always good, and yeah, I frankly love this composition because the power spike at 6 Vanguard is so incredibly strong. But one thing to note is that this composition does fall off late game because everyone in the late game is going to be playing Janna if they're facing you. So be sure to transition into something like 4 Mystic and 4 Vanguard, or maybe even 2 Vanguard if a lot of your lobbies are adding in Janna into their teams. So next up we have snipers. Astro snipers have been either the most popular comp or the least popular comp, but right now they're kind of in a weird middle ground. There's a guy who is rank 1 in North America right now, and his recent games have all been Astro snipers. Look at this. Pretty much his past 5 or 6 games, all Vanguard sniper, and he did well in pretty much all of them except for one of them. So definitely still a strong comp. Note here that in his most recent game where he won, he didn't even have a blue buff on Teemo, so it shows that even though blue buff is super good on Teemo, it's not a requirement to play the comp if you have great, for example, Jhin items such as what he had here. But yeah, preferably if you are playing this build, you have a blue buff, ability power items, or Teemo. I like Luden's Echo as a 3rd item because then Teemo gets his ultimate off right at the start of the match. Jhin, you'll want like Giant Slayers, IE, Deathblade, Last Whisper, all those sorts of items. Guardian Angel's really good on him too. And then later in the game, you'll itemize Gnar, Wukong, and if you have time or if it's Treasure Trove, go ahead and itemize Thresh, maybe like a Spear of Shojin to pull more units in. Right now, I have listed here the 2 sniper version. He's playing the 4 sniper version. Both are fine. I personally like both builds, but since I'm showing you his build over here, I decided to show you guys the other build over here. All you have to do is replace Lulu and Karma with Caitlyn and Ashe, and that way you keep the Chrono buff and the Celestial buff. So moving on to the next compositions in the B tier, Blaster Brawler has been picking up a lot in popularity. One popular player, Soju, played this a lot in the Twitch Rivals tournament, where he runs a Jinx carry and then the 4 Brawlers and then some Rebels to complement Jinx. And he's been seeing a lot of success with that, but since he started playing it, I feel like this composition isn't as strong anymore because now everyone's playing it, and before when he was only doing it, he was the only player going Jinx every game. Now I see 2 Jinxes every game, and that just means the comp's a lot weaker than it was previously when no one was playing it before. So just keep that in mind. Even though it's a very good comp if uncontested, if someone else is contesting you, there are probably better options unless you get the perfect start for this build. But yeah, this is the same. You play this the same way as you did in the previous patches. It's super, super strong. You want like a red buff. You want a lot of sword and bow items for Jinx, and pretty much just go from there. Your late game's Aurelion Soul. I'd avoid 6 Rebels and pretty much just stick with the 4 Brawler build. Lastly, in the B tier, we have Cybernetics. There are a couple Cybernetic one-tricks in the top 10 right now, and those are pretty much the only people playing this composition. I don't see too much of Cybernetics anywhere else, but pretty much you just go for perfect item vein as you've been doing before, put all your random items on your front line such as Leona, Vi, and Fiora, and then hit your late game with Echo and pretty much try to win through Thresh and Echo in the super, super late game. But this composition's a lot weaker right now because there are a lot of 6 Vanguard players, and if you ever face a 6 Vanguard in the middle of the game, you are going to lose 15 to 20 life, and that just reduces your ability to greed to level 9, get a bunch of Threshes, and get a bunch of pull-ins from Thresh. So lastly, we have the 6 Blademaster build. This build is great because it counters a lot of compositions because of its true damage. So any resistance heavy composition, the true damage is going to help a lot from Master Yi. Also, Zed is great at picking apart backline carries, if people don't position properly against you. So this comp is very well and much alive. Some people like going rapid fire cannon and Runons. And people have been skipping out on the Rageblade and QSS. It's not like the traditional Bang Bros build that we've been used to in the past. I've seen items more spread out rather than concentrated on 1 or 2 units, which is a little interesting to me. Personally, I haven't played the new style of 6 Blademaster build yet, but in Korea, this is super popular, so go ahead and look at some Korean players if you want to learn how to play this build. Lastly, we have the Star Guardian Sorcerer compositions. Again, super popular in Korea, not so much in North America or Europe. But one way you can play this is to combine it with Protectors, as we talked about before. But I have seen some people going for the traditional Star Guardian Sorcerer build with the Syndra carry, with the blue buff, and pretty much just trying to put all your leftover items on everyone else. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Those are all the comps that are being played right now. Let's go ahead and drop down to the items. Personally, I like Tier the most because blue buff is such a core item in every single build, except for 1 or 2 compositions. Sword is great because it's flexible, it builds Guardian Angel, it builds all the damage items if you're going for an attack damage comp. Belt's really good because of Warmogs for Protectors, so since Jarvan's one of the best units, Belt's going to be really good in this game just to get the Warmogs. It also builds red buff if you're going for Jinx, it builds Morello if you're going for Cassiopeia. Worst case, it's like a Redemption or a Zephyr, so all around just like a pretty decent item. Chain Vest, super good. It's dropped down in strength a little bit compared to previous patches because no one really cares about Bramble Vest anymore. But again, this thing builds Guardian Angel, it builds red buff. You could build like a Shroud of Stillness on it late game, worst comes to worst, so it's going to be really good still. Gloves, very flexible, similar to Sword, but a little worse than it. It has that same flexibility because it could build both offensive and defensive items. Next up, we have the bow. Bow is great for rapid fire cannons, great for Last Whisper, good for Rageblade if you're going the Ashe mid game. One popular mid game build is going like Rageblade, Shojin, Ashe, and then you transition into Janna late game. That's part of like the super duper legendary build that we were talking about before, where they transition into a Janna Xerath in the late game. Lastly, Rod and Negatron. These are probably the 2 weakest items. Rod's probably a tiny bit better than the Negatron. Ironically, if you get both of these items together, it's really good because Ionic Spark is a super strong item for the early game. But due to the other items they can build, and just based on the strength of how strong Tier, Sword, and Belt are, Rod and Negatron are probably towards the bottom of your priority on the carousel for this patch. Now we go on to the item quadrant over here. Again, blue buff, probably one of the best items of this patch just because it's very required for certain champions. But yeah, if you don't know how to read this, if you're new to the site, you'll want to build the items on the top right, avoid the ones on the bottom left, because the ones on the bottom left are situational and weak. The ones on the top right are strong and versatile, meaning that they are both good and work in a bunch of different compositions or champions. But yeah, that's pretty much it for this week. Play the S tier comps, because again, all the top players, 15 out of 20 games on average, they're playing either Dark Stars or Protectors. It's really only the one tricks or the like 25% of the other games where people are going for all of these other compositions. But yeah, hopefully you guys have fun. It might seem a little boring because there are only 2 good comps, but these 2 compositions have a lot of different variations in them, and learning the ins and outs of these compositions will get you that much further compared to everyone else at your rating. So hopefully you guys have fun with that. If you guys are new to the channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below to get updated on new videos and get better at TFT. If you want to do even more, go ahead and join our Discord at bunnymuffins.lol/discord. And lastly, I'll be streaming this weekend on twitch.tv/bunnymuffinslol. 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. US Eastern Time, so I hope to catch you guys there every day this weekend. But yeah, that's it for me. I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to share and subscribe, and of course smash that like button. Each like is an LP I gain before the next video.